My name is Renata Voss. I was 26 years old and 11 days into my first full-time job when it happened. Gate agent, Crestline Regional Airport, Concourse B, assigned to the 6 a.m. shift because I was the newest hire and nobody senior wanted it. It was a Tuesday. 6:47 a.m. The terminal was filling up the way it always did at that hour. Rolling luggage and coffee cups and people walking fast enough to signal they had somewhere more important to be. The amber glow of the gate number bored through a long bar of yellow light across the carpet at the base of our desk. I had learned in my first week to use that light as a reference point. If a passenger was standing inside it, looking up at the board more than once, they were probably lost. I was scanning boarding passes when I saw her standing in it. She was small and dressed carefully. A dark wool coat, a leather handbag held with both hands, a rolling suitcase parked at her side. She looked at the board, looked at her ticket, looked back at the board. None of the other agents at the desk looked up. There were 4 of us working that morning. I was the only one who saw her look at the board a third time. I set down my scanner. My mother came to the United States from Romania when she was 31. She spoke almost no English when she arrived, and she has told me that the worst part was not the paperwork or the unfamiliar city. It was standing somewhere public and not being able to ask a simple question. Not because she didn't have the words, but because no one slowed down long enough to hear her try. I grew up translating. Grocery stores, school meetings, phone calls with insurance companies. By the time I was 14, I could switch registers mid-sentence, formal to informal, Romanian to English, back again. I didn't think of it as a skill. It was just something I did. I had listed it on my airport application under additional languages. The hiring manager had nodded. No one had mentioned it again. The job was entry-level. Gate operations, scan boarding passes, manage the hold luggage queue, read the departure screens, answer questions about delays. The role came with a laminated credential badge on a plastic clip, a uniform I ironed the night before my first shift, and a starting wage of $19.40 an hour. Enough to cover rent on the studio I'd moved into 3 weeks before my first shift. My supervisor was named Dana Pratt, who had been in airport operations for 16 years and managed new hires the way a contractor manages load-bearing walls. You were either structural or you were a problem. In the 11 days since I'd started, I had learned the gate rotation, memorized the connection windows for the 6 most common layover cities, and stayed 20 minutes past my shift twice to help close out the boarding queue. Dana's instructions on my first day were precise. Stay at the desk during active boarding. Do not leave the desk to assist passengers who have not yet approached. There are information kiosks for general wayfinding. If someone has a complex issue, you radio it in. I said I understood. I did understand. The woman was still standing in the amber light when I looked up again, 3 minutes later. She had not moved toward the desk. She had not moved toward any of the information kiosks. She was looking at her ticket again, and something in the angle of her shoulders, the slight forward curve, the way she was holding the handbag tighter than she had been, told me she had been standing there long enough to feel the particular kind of invisible that happens in a busy place when you can't make yourself understood. I stepped out from behind the desk. I crossed the 40 feet of carpet between us. I said, in Romanian, "Can I help you find your gate?" The change in her face was immediate. Not relief exactly, something quieter than that, more like a door opening in a room that had been very close. She told me in Romanian that she was looking for gate B14. Her flight was to Chicago. She had a connection. She had asked 2 people and they had pointed in different directions. I looked at her ticket. Gate B14 was ours. She was at the right gate. But her connection in Chicago, a flight to Frankfurt, departed from O'Hare's International Terminal and her layover was tight. I told her she was in the right place for now. I told her what to do in Chicago step by step. She nodded as I spoke. She asked 2 follow-up questions. I answered both. Then she asked if I would walk with her to the seat nearest the window, because she had not been able to tell which side of the gate she should wait at. I said yes. I carried her rolling suitcase. It was not heavy. I walked her to the window seat, confirmed she could see the plane from there, and told her they would start boarding in about 20 minutes. She held my hand briefly when I turned to leave. She said something in Romanian that I did not write down. It translated roughly to, "You are a good person. I can tell by how you moved." I walked back to the desk. Dana was waiting. "You left the desk," she said. She was disoriented, I said. She didn't know which side to wait at. "There are information kiosks. She doesn't speak English." Dana looked at me for a moment. Then she looked back at her screen. "Don't leave the desk during active operations," she said. "I won't say it again." I said nothing. I turned back to my screen. I thought it was over. It wasn't over, but I thought it was. The woman boarded her flight. The morning rush moved through and cleared. I scanned boarding passes and answered questions about the delay on the 8:15 to Indianapolis and refilled the luggage tag station twice. Dana did not speak to me again for the rest of the shift. 4 days later, I arrived for my shift and found a different atmosphere. There had been, I learned from a colleague named Patricia, a commendation filed. A formal one. Someone had contacted the airport's customer relations inbox and described the interaction, the language assistance, the walk to the gate, the connection guidance. The commendation had named me. Patricia told me this in the break room before the shift started, in the low, slightly careful voice people use when the news is good but the context is complicated. "Dana pulled it," Patricia said. "Pulled it how?" I asked. "It came through customer relations. She redirected it. Said she'd handle the follow-up internally." I sat with that for a moment. "Does that happen often?" I asked. Patricia looked at her coffee. "More than it should," she said. The staff meeting was on Thursday. It was a routine operations review, departure metrics, hold bag errors, queue management. I had attended 2 of them since starting. They were administrative and efficient, and I had no reason to expect this one to be different. Dana ran the meeting from the front of the break room. 6 of us seated, including Patricia and a senior agent named Gerald who had been at Crestline for 9 years. Dana worked through the standard items. Then, near the end, she said she wanted to address a pattern that had come up this week. She did not look at me when she said it. "When we are at the desk during active operations," she said, "we stay at the desk. That is not a preference. That is protocol. If we leave the desk to handle a situation that falls outside our jurisdiction, wayfinding, translation, personal escort, we create a gap in the operation. We put boarding at risk. We put our colleagues in a harder position." She paused. "I want to be clear," she said, "that good intentions are not a substitute for following procedure. Being helpful in the wrong direction is still a problem." Gerald said nothing. Patricia said nothing. The other 2 agents said nothing. I said, "I helped a passenger reach her seat at our own gate." Dana looked at me then. "You left the desk during active operations," she said. "The operation wasn't disrupted. We weren't boarding yet." "That's not your call to make, Renata." Something tightened in the base of my throat. Not defensiveness, not the heat that comes before an argument, something narrower like a wire drawn taut. "She'd been standing there for several minutes," I said. "No one had approached her. That's what the kiosks are for. She doesn't speak English. Then she should have approached the desk. She didn't know she could." Dana set her clipboard on the table. When she spoke again, her voice was the same, measured, even, carrying the warmth of someone explaining something obvious to someone who keeps failing to grasp it. "I understand you felt you were being helpful," she said. "But this team works because everyone follows the same protocols. When someone decides their judgment supersedes the protocol, it affects everyone else. And frankly, I'd expect more from someone who's been given a real opportunity here. It reads as ungrateful." She looked at the rest of the group. "Any questions on the other items?" There were no questions. I drove home on Harwick Drive in silence. I didn't open my phone that night. I sat at my kitchen table. I unclipped my badge from my jacket. I set it face up on the table. I looked at the photo, the slightly faded color, the corners of the laminate beginning to lift. I set it back on the table. I made tea I didn't drink. I went to bed. In the morning I woke at 5:10 a.m. I ironed my uniform. I drove to Crestline Regional. I clocked in at 6:31 a.m. I took my position at the Gate B14 desk. I started scanning boarding passes. Marcus Hale appeared at the desk at 9:15 a.m. on a Friday, 3 weeks after the staff meeting. I knew who he was, airport director. His photo was on the staff bulletin board in the break room, but I had never spoken to him. He was in his mid-50s, a tall man who moved through the concourse the way people do when they're used to knowing where they're going. He had a leather portfolio folder under one arm. He stopped at the desk and said, "Is one of you Renata Voss?" I said I was. He said, "I'd like a few minutes. Is now workable?" Dana had materialized at the edge of the desk. I did not know how long she had been standing there. "Mr. Hale," she said. "I can help with whatever you need." "Thank you, Dana," he said. "It's Renata I'm looking for." He walked me to the end of the concourse, near the windows overlooking the tarmac. He asked how I was settling in. I said fine. He said he'd heard it had been an interesting few weeks. "A passenger contacted us," he said. "Her family, specifically. Her daughter reached out to our customer relations office, then followed up directly with my office when the first contact wasn't returned." Something in me went very still, not surprise exactly, more like the moment before a picture comes into focus. "The woman I helped," I said. "Her name is Elena Marchetti. She's 81. She travels twice a year to see her grandchildren in Frankfurt, and she has been making this connection through our airport for 6 years." He opened the leather folder. He reached in and removed a single printed sheet, a formal commendation letter, airport letterhead, my name in the second paragraph. He took it out and held it for a moment. Then he opened the tablet he was carrying, navigated to an email thread, and turned the screen so I could see it. The thread was between his office and a contact listed as Marchetti Sophia, Board Liaison, International Terminal Expansion Fund. He held it there so the screen faced outward, toward me and incidentally toward Dana, who had followed at a distance and was now standing close enough to see. "Mrs. Marchetti," he said, "is a member of the Donor Advisory Committee for our international expansion. Her family's foundation has been involved in this airport's growth for a long time. That's not why what you did mattered, but it is why her daughter's message arrived directly on my desk within 48 hours of the original contact going unanswered." Dana said, "I was handling the follow-up internally." Marcus Hale looked at her. "The follow-up was handled by suppressing a formal commendation," he said. It was not a question. His voice was the same temperature as hers, level, warm, carrying the particular weight of someone who does not need to raise it. Dana said, "I was addressing a protocol issue at the same time. Renata had left the desk during active. She helped an elderly passenger in her own language reach her own gate," he said. "And then she was reprimanded for it in a staff meeting." The silence after that lasted 4 seconds. I counted them. He turned back to me. He set the commendation letter on the desk between us. "I want to be clear about something," he said. "What you did was exactly what this airport should be doing. You saw someone who needed help. You had something to offer. You offered it." He paused. Dana's words in that meeting, being helpful in the wrong direction, are not this airport's values. He looked at Dana. "I'll want to speak with you this afternoon." Dana said nothing. I said, "Thank you." He said, "Don't thank me. You earned this." 6 months later, I was working in passenger experience, a new role that had been created, in part, because Marcus Hale had made the case to the operations board that Crestline had a gap in multilingual support and a staff member who could begin filling it. The title was formal. The salary was $7,340 a month, a figure I had looked at on the offer letter twice before signing. My desk was on the operations side of Concourse B. On it I kept a single item. My original gate agent badge, the laminate lifting at the corners, the photo faded. I had declined to turn it in when they issued the new one. The credentials manager had looked at it, looked at me, and said nothing. Dana sent a message 6 weeks after her conversation with Marcus Hale. It arrived on a Sunday evening. It said, "I thought you'd want to know I'm transitioning to a consulting role. No hard feelings. I hope you understand that I was trying to protect the team's operations." I read it once. I set the phone face down on the kitchen table. I did not respond. What I know now that I didn't know then is that the moment I stepped out from behind that desk, I had already made the decision that mattered. Not the one that got me promoted. The other one, the one about who I was going to be when no one was watching and nothing was guaranteed. I still wear the old badge sometimes, clipped to the inside of my jacket where no one can see it. Not because it proves anything. Because of the weight of it. The slight give of the worn laminate under my thumb, the specific resistance of the clip that has been opened and closed 1,000 times. Some things earn their place by staying through everything that happens around them. If this story reminded you of someone in your life, a person who moved toward the one no one else saw, pass it along to them. They'll know why you sent it.